6 Russian fighters, 3 American jets,
and 30 seconds from a shooting war that would light up every screen on the planet.
This is the story of how silence became the deadliest weapon in the sky. The alarm ripped through the dawn like a blade. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson was halfway through his second coffee when the klaxon screamed across. Naval Air Station Oceana. The mark hit the table.
Hot liquid splashed across mission briefs that suddenly didn't matter anymore.
Around him, 24 pilots scrambled from their seats, chairs clattering against linoleum as boots pounded toward the ready room.
Razor flight. You're up.
The voice belonged to Commander Sarah Mitchell, her face lit by the red glow of emergency lighting. We've got a situation developing over international waters.
Russian activity heavy. You launch in 7 minutes.
7 minutes. Thompson's heart rate didn't spike. Couldn't afford to. Not after 18 years of flying the F-15 Eagle.
Not after 2 combat tours and more close calls than he cared to count.
But something in Mitchell's eyes told him this wasn't another cat and mouse
game with Moscow's finest.
This was different.
Captain Sarah Phoenix
Chun was already suiting up when Thompson hit the locker room.
Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking straps, testing seals, running through the mental checklist that separated living pilots from dead ones.
Beside her, Major David Ghost Rodriguez pulled his helmet from its shelf, his jaw set in that familiar line of concentration. Breathe? Chun asked, not looking up. Contested airspace.
Russian posturing near the exclusion zone.
Command wants eyes on target. Ready response if things heat up. Thompson grabbed his own gear, muscle memory taking over.
Standard intercept protocol.
Stay tight, stay smart, stay alive. That's the plan, Rodriguez muttered.
5 minutes later, 3 F-15 Eagles screamed down the runway, afterburners painting the morning sky orange and gold.
The sun was just breaking the horizon,
casting long shadows across the flight line as the
fighters climbed through layers of
coastal clouds. Below them, the Atlantic stretched endlessly, dark and restless, whitecaps catching the early light.
Inside his cockpit,
Thompson watched his instruments settle into their normal rhythm.
Airspeed climbing, altitude passing through 15,000 feet. Radar scope clear, except for
friendly contacts and the distant smudge of a
commercial airliner
following its peaceful route to Europe.
Peaceful. The word felt fragile up here.
30,000 feet above the ocean.
When nations drew invisible lines and dared each other to cross them. Razor led. This is Overlord. The AWACS controller's voice crackled through Thompson's headset.
We're painting multiple contacts, bearing 0 for 5.
Range 80 miles. Heading to 70.
Speed and altitude suggest military intercept.
Thompson's stomach tightened.
Copy. Overlord.
Classification. A pause. 2 seconds that felt like 20. Razor led.
We're showing 6 hostile contacts.
Probable Su-27 flankers.
They're coming in hot.
6. The number hung in Thompson's mind like a death sentence. 3 against 6 wasn't a fight.
It was a slaughter waiting to happen.
Phoenix, Ghost, you copy? Copy lead. Chun's voice was steady. Always steady.
That's why she was his wingman.
With you, us, Rodriguez added. Stay tight. We maintain patrol pattern until further orders. These guys want to dance. We make them work for it. The contacts appeared on Thompson's radar 18 seconds later. 6 bright returns, moving fast, spreading into a tactical formation that made his blood run cold. These weren't routine intercepts. This was a coordinated attack pattern, professional and precise.
The kind of maneuver you practiced for months before executing in live airspace. And they were heading straight for Razor flight.
Overlord, Razor led, confirm hostile intent. Razor led, hostiles are. Jesus, they're lighting you up, Hawk. Multiple radar locks.
All 6 aircraft. They're not playing around. Thompson's threat warning receiver screamed to life.
The sound was designed to trigger primal fear, and it worked.
High-pitched warbling.
That meant death was looking at you.
Through a targeting computer.
Finger hovering over the trigger.
Waiting for the order to end your life in a fireball of metal and aviation fuel.
Brake right. Brake right.
Thompson yanked his stick,
pulling 6 GS as his F-15 carved a violent arc through the sky.
His vision narrowed, blood draining toward his legs as the G-suit inflated, keeping him conscious through the punishing turn.
Chun and Rodriguez followed,
their fighters mirroring his maneuver.
3 eagles moving as one organism.
Survival instinct honed through countless hours of training kicking in at the
cellular level, but the Russians had anticipated it.
2 Su-27s peeled off to cut the angle, their silver fuselage gleaming like sharks in the morning sun. Another pair climbed vertical, positioning themselves above the American formation. ready to dive down with all the advantages of altitude and gravity. The final two flankers held position,
blocking any escape route back toward friendly territory. It was beautiful, in a terrible way. Perfect tactical execution. No wasted movement, no hesitation, just cold, calculated professionalism aimed at one goal, trapping 3 American fighters with nowhere to run.
"They're boxing us in," Chen said, her voice tight.
Thompson scanned his instruments, mind racing through options.
"Dive for the deck."
The Russians would follow, and at wave top altitude, there was no room for error.
One mistake, one stall, and you were swimming.
If you survived the impact,
Climb? Same problem.
the flankers had them on altitude. Any vertical move would put Razor flight at a massive disadvantage.
Run for home?
The 2 Su-27s blocking their 6. A clock would turn that into a stern chase. And Russian fighters had legs for days.
They'd run Razor out of fuel before reaching friendly airspace.
Force them to ditch or surrender. Razor led, Overlord.
Reinforcements are inbound, but
You're looking at 20 minutes minimum. Can you hold?
20 minutes.
Thompson checked his fuel gauge. The hard maneuvering was drinking gas like water through a sieve. Overlord, Razor led, fuel state is critical. We can't sustain defensive posture for 20 minutes.
Understood, Razor. Do what you can.
We're working on something. Working on something. The universal military phrase that meant nobody had any idea what to do next.
A Russian voice cut across the international emergency frequency.
Heavily accented but clear. American aircraft. You are in violation of protected airspace.
Alter course immediately or face consequences. Thompson keyed his MIC.
Negative. Russian flight.
We are in international waters conducting lawful operations under established protocols.
You are the ones creating a dangerous situation here.
Then you understand danger very well, American. You have 30 seconds to comply. 30 seconds.
Thompson looked out his canopy at the sky around him. 6 Su-27s, perfectly positioned. Weapons hot. Fingers on triggers. Below, the Atlantic churned, cold and merciless.
Above, nothing but empty blue sky stretching to the edge of space.
Empty sky. His radar warning receiver was going insane now. Multiple locks from multiple directions. The Russians were painting all 3 eagles simultaneously, showing their hand, making it clear this wasn't a bluff. One wrong word, one aggressive move, and this confrontation would go from 10 stand-up to international incident in the time it
Took a missile to burn through 10
miles of air.
lead. They're closing, Rodriguez said quietly.
5 miles and tightening.
Thompson could see them now without instruments.
Silver darts against blue sky.
Contrails streaming behind them like white ribbons marking the edges of his cage. Beautiful aircraft, he thought distantly.
Too bad they were trying to kill him. Phoenix, Ghost, we stay together.
They split us up. We're dead. Defensive formation. Watch your fuel and wait for.
The radar scope changed. It was subtle at first. A ghost return at the edge of detection. Altitude reading impossible.
70,000 feet.
Nothing flew at 70,000 feet except satellites and spy planes, and those didn't show up on combat radar.
Overlord. Razor lead. I am showing an anomalous contact bearing to 20. High altitude. Can you confirm? Silence. Overlord.
Razor led. The AWACS controller's voice was different now, uncertain, almost awed.
We're seeing it too.
That signature. It doesn't match anything in our database. It's descending.
Heading your direction. The Russian pilots had noticed it too. Thompson watched one of the Su-27s break formation slightly,
Its pilot looking around.
trying to find the source of whatever was tickling their radar warning receivers, because something was coming. Something big.
The contact descended through 60,000 feet.
50,000. 40,000. Moving with patient, inexorable purpose, like a stone dropping through water.
Radar returns were fragmentary, inconsistent, the signature flickering in and out of existence as if the aircraft, if it was an aircraft, was made of smoke and shadows. Jesus, Chun whispered, what is that?
Thompson didn't answer.
He was watching the Russians, watching their formation start to waver, watching confidence crack.
35,000 feet. And then it appeared.
Not gradually, not with the slow reveal of distance closing. One moment, the sky above the confrontation was empty. The next, a shadow fell across the world.
The B-2 spirit emerged from nothing like a hole torn in reality itself. Thompson had seen B-2s before. Every military pilot had. But seeing one in photographs, in videos, even on the flight line was nothing compared to witnessing its arrival in contested airspace.
The bomber didn't fly so much as haunt the sky. It's impossible geometry defying every instinct about how aircraft should look.
Charcoal grey skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it.
Wings swept back in angles that belonged to alien engineering. No vertical tail, no visible cockpit, just pure predatory shape that moved through the air like death's own shadow. It took up station above razor flight without hurry. No aggressive maneuvers, no weapons deployed. It simply existed there, at 45,000 feet, watching everything below with the patience of a god looking down on mortals.
The effect on the Russian formation was instantaneous and absolute. Thompson watched it happen in real time.
6 Su-27s that had been moving with perfect coordination suddenly lost their rhythm. The tight intercept pattern dissolved.
Pilots who moments before had been closing a trap now hesitated, their aircraft wavering like compass needles near a magnet, because they understood the B-2 Spirit wasn't just another fighter entering the confrontation. It represented a completely different dimension of warfare.
Strategic reach that extended across continents.
Precision strike. Capability that could turn targets
into memory from ranges their own air.
Defenses couldn't touch.
Technology so advanced it made their best systems look like toys.
And it was here,
in their airspace, watching them.
Led. Rodriguez's voice carried something
Thompson rarely heard from his wingman. Wonder, did command send that?
Thompson didn't know, didn't care.
The Spirit's presence answered every question that mattered. The Russian voice came back on the emergency frequency, but the confidence was gone.
American aircraft. We are adjusting our patrol route. Thompson almost smiled.
Adjusting patrol route. The universal military euphemism
for running away without
admitting you were running away. One by one, the Su-27s peeled off.
No ceremony, no threats, no final warnings. They simply turned northeast and climbed, their silver bodies catching
the sun as they accelerated away from the confrontation zone.
Within 90 seconds,
the tactical display that had shown 6 hostile contacts suffocating.
Rays of flight showed nothing
but clear sky and a single friendly contact maintaining position overhead.
The B-2 Spirit held station for another 3 minutes, silent and moving, making
absolutely certain the message had been received and understood.
Then, as smoothly as it had appeared,
it banked to the west and climbed,
its angular profile dissolving back into the thin air at altitude until even Thompson's radar couldn't track it anymore. Overlord, razor lead. Hostiles are breaking off. Situation is resolved.
Copy. Razor lead. The controller sounded like he'd just witnessed a miracle. Maybe he had.
Return to base when able. We'll have the debrief ready. Thompson took a long breath. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up with his nervous system.
Beside him, Chong and Rodriguez were doing the same thing. He was checking instruments,
confirming they were really still alive,
trying to process what had just happened. Led, Jen said quietly. That bomber, it never said a word. Didn't need to, Thompson replied.
Because that was the truth. The B-2 Spirit hadn't fired weapons, hadn't issued threats, hadn't even acknowledged the confrontation was happening. It had simply appeared,
and its presence alone had rewritten the entire tactical situation.
That was power.
Real power. Not the loud, aggressive kind that announced itself with fire and thunder. The quiet kind. The kind that didn't need to prove anything because everyone already knew. The 3 F-15s turned for home, their pilots silent, each lost in their own thoughts about what they'd just witnessed.
Below them, the Atlantic rolled on, indifferent to the drama that had played out above its waves. Commercial traffic continued along established routes.
The world kept turning, but something had changed up here in the
thin air where nations played their deadly games. A message had been delivered, and 6 Russian pilots were flying home,
knowing they'd looked into the face of something they couldn't match, couldn't counter, couldn't even fully understand. The debrief lasted for hours. Naval intelligence wanted every detail, every timeline, every radar contact and radio transmission analyzed and cross-referenced.
Thompson sat in a windowless room with Chern and Rodriguez, walking through the
morning's events with clinical
precision while analysts
took notes and senior officers asked
the same questions in different ways.
But the story they really wanted to hear couldn't be captured in tactical reports. What did it feel like? Asked a young lieutenant commander who'd never seen combat. When the B-2 appeared, Thompson considered the question. Felt like, how did you describe the moment when death stops reaching for your throat because something darker and more powerful stepped into the room.
Relief, he said finally,
And respect.
for whoever made that call to send it. Because somebody had made that call, somewhere in the chain of command.
Somebody had been watching the situation, develop and decided the appropriate response wasn't more fighters, wasn't diplomatic protests,
Wasn't carefully worded warnings through back channels.
the appropriate response was to send a ghost. The story spread through the fleet within hours.
By evening, every ready room from Oceania to San Diego was buzzing with different versions of the tale. 3 eagles, 6 flankers, and the shadow that changed everything. Details got embellished, timelines compressed.
But the core truth remained solid.
Presence alone could shift destiny.
Young pilots fresh from training listened with wide eyes, trying to imagine what,
Thompson and his wingmen had felt.
when that angular shadow appeared overhead.
Veteran aviators who'd flown through Cold War tensions and desert campaigns nodded knowingly, remembering similar
Moments when American technology.
had reminded the world why certain lines shouldn't be crossed.
In Moscow, the 6 Russian pilots filed their own reports, factual accounts that mentioned an unidentified
Stealth aircraft entering the engagement zone and the tactical decision to disengage rather than risk escalation.
Their commanders read between the lines, understanding what their pilots were really saying. We were outmatched, not outgunned, not outnumbered.
Outmatched on a level that made continued confrontation pointless.
The incident got classified immediately.
Too sensitive for public consumption.
Too embarrassing for certain parties. Too perfect an example of strategic deterrence.
To risk watering down with political spin. But among military professionals on both sides, it became legend.
The day a single bomber ended a fight without firing a shot. 6 months later, Thompson stood on the flight line watching a B-2.
Spirit taxi passed on its way to the runway. Different aircraft, different crew.
But the same impossible geometry that still made his breath catch. The pilot raised a gloved hand in casual salute as the bomber rolled past.
And Thompson returned it, fellow professional to fellow professional.
Because that was the thing about real warriors. They didn't need speeches or medals or public recognition.
They just needed to know that when it mattered,
When the chips were down and everything hung in the balance, they'd done their job.
that B-2 crew had done theirs perfectly. They'd arrived without drama, done what needed doing,
Left without ceremony.
and in the process, they'd prevented a confrontation.
That could have spiraled into something far darker.
That was the kind of power worth having.
The kind that didn't need to shout. Tonight, somewhere over contested waters, pilots are flying patrol routes they've flown 100 times before.
Russian, American, Chinese, European doesn't matter.
They're professionals doing their jobs.
Maintaining the invisible boundaries that keep the peace. And every single one of them knows the lesson. Thompson learned that morning above the Atlantic.
Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't the one you use. It's the one you don't have to.
The Beta Spirit continues flying its missions in silence. Crews rotate through deployments, maintain readiness, practice precision that most people will never know exists. They don't talk about their work. They don't seek recognition.
They just remain ready.
Because somewhere, someday, another confrontation will develop. Another group of pilots will find themselves outnumbered, outflanked. Seconds from a catastrophic mistake that could light up headlines across the world.
And when that moment comes, a shadow will appear, not with thunder or fire or aggressive displays of force, just presence.
Pure, overwhelming, undeniable presence.
And the fight will be over before anyone realizes it began.
If this story moved you, if it made you understand that real strength doesn't need to prove itself, then do me a favor, hit that subscribe button for Silent Warriors, because there are more stories like this one. Stories about the men and women who stand watch in places you'll never see, doing things you'll never hear about, making decisions that shape the world while the world sleeps. They don't do it for glory.
They do it because it's right. And sometimes, just sometimes, we get to glimpse what they accomplish. Silent Warriors. Subscribe now.
Because these stories deserve to be told.
And warriors who serve in silence deserve to be remembered, even if they never ask for it.